Oh, Kindred is fun too.
Best champion in the game.
All
Yeah.
right, let's see. So we'll probably go ahead and get started now since it is 12. All right, so today we're gonna go over like a lot of macro stuff for a jungle. Um, Basically, like jungle is essentially like the quarterback of the team, at least from my perspective. Maybe some people would argue otherwise. But as the jungler, you are kind of the person driving the game forward and deciding what plays happen, what plays don't happen. You are the only person that's not locked into a lane other than support, who can kind of roam around basically whenever they want to as well. Um, but even then, they're kind of locked into their own lane here and there. So that kind of gives you the power to decide exactly how the game's going to be played out, what your team is playing for, why you're playing for it. So it's important to understand like all of those like minute macro details so that you can actually control the game in the best way possible. Because even if you have control of the game, if you are kind of steering it in the wrong direction, sometimes that can even like that can look like you're steering it in the correct direction. It can look like you're playing, um, to win, but if you're not playing for specific win cons, if you're not playing for the optimal plan, very often that ends up in just a losing situation in the long run. So we'll go ahead and actually get this started. We're going to cover a lot of macro concepts. There's a lot of information, but not necessarily a whole lot of slides. And the reason for that is that I expect there to be like a lot of questions. So I do highly encourage you guys to kind of jump in when you want something kind of elaborated on, or you need something explained farther, or you just have general questions. There'll also be plenty of time at the end for like any general questions you might have. Doesn't even have to be like a topic that we covered on this presentation, but if it is, that's great as well. So yeah, today we've got Jungle Masterclass Maximizing Impact. It's going to cover a lot of kind of how to play the map and how to really, really be the person driving the game forward, and what makes, jungle what people kind of refer to as the most OP role in solo queue, because you are that person that decides basically everything. So things you want to think about here are the basic impact options for the jungler. That is ganking, counter ganking, shoving, diving, collecting info, and securing objectives. And a big, big, big key thing to keep in mind here is don't waste time. Always be doing something. This doesn't apply to just jungle as well. This little kind of keynote here. No matter what role you're playing, you should be always, always, always doing something. Like very often, I'll see laners kind of shove in their lane and then kind of just like click around in circles, while they wait for the lane to bounce back to them so that they can shove it in again. And that process will kind of repeat itself. And the reason that's bad is that you're wasting all of that time. And that time really does build up throughout the course of a game to the point where you end up wasting full minutes of just kind of spinning in circles. A good thing that you can do, if you're a laner, if you are a jungler, is just find anything at all to do with that time. And if you can't find anything concrete, anything that's netting you like a clear benefit, then just hover somebody else. So like for that example with the mid lane, if you are kind of shoving in your lane and you're not sure what to do with your time, just kind of walk into a bush, walk kind of toward a different lane, walk toward top, walk toward bot. Put yourself in a position where if anything were to happen, you would be the first to rotate there, or you would at least be able to react decently fast instead of kind of just spinning in circles and waiting. And for jungle, it's kind of the same thing. If you don't have anything to do, you don't have a reason to recall, you don't have camps up, there's no reason for you to invade the enemy jungle, all that good stuff. Just find someone to hover. Find a play to kind of just hover around, wait to see if anything happens, wait to see if you need to escort like a wave in. Just put yourself in a position where you're ready to react to anything that happens. So the main thing that we want to kind of keep in mind as the jungler is creating a game plan, specifically for the first 14 minutes of the game. So the cool thing about those first 14 minutes is that usually you can decide all of kind of what you want to do with that time and with that early phase before the match even starts. You can very easily kind of sit down and let's say you have like unlimited time to look at two team comps. You can say, okay, in theory, this is what I want to happen. I'm going to play for this objective. I'm going to play around this lane. I'm going to path this way. These are the camps I'm going to do. These are the camps the enemy's going to do. Because they're doing those camps, these plays are out of reach for them, and that means that I'm unlocked to make those plays myself, or I can match their own plays. So it's really important to kind of like sit down, go through this process as much as you possibly can. Like if you want to just look at screenshots of team comps and competitive play, like I would highly recommend doing that. You can look at screenshots of like professional matches. Like we've got Worlds coming up in just 2 days. And a really, really good thing that anyone could do, and this is for any role, but it's really, really important for jungle, is look at those team comps before the match actually starts. Look at both team comps and really kind of try to visualize how the game should go, and then try to think about what you would want to do as the jungler on either team in order to win the game. Because no matter what your comp looks like, you're almost always going to have some sort of win con. You almost never will like fully lose the game from draft. So in that regard, you know, we want to be able to understand why is it that we're doing what we're doing. We never want to put ourselves in a position that we're like autopiloting and just kind of pathing because we've pathed this way before and it makes sense to us. So try to plan out those first 14 minutes. The more you do it, and the more you kind of go through that practice scenario, like taking screenshots of games or just like looking at team comps and kind of visualizing it, the faster you'll get, and the more often you're going to be able to pull that off before your actual matches start. So you want to be able to do that. You want to be able to adapt the game plan to accommodate for changes in the game state. It could be that somebody skills something unexpected. Could be that a bad trade happens somewhere. It could be that somebody randomly gets caught. It could be that somebody paths completely unexpectedly and shows up on like the opposite side of the map you thought they would be on. These are all things that can pretty significantly change your game plan and can allow you to pull off extra plays maybe you weren't expecting to be able to pull off, or it can maybe even cut off certain plays that you did expect to be able to pull off. And then a third one here, keep an eye out for enemy mistakes and unexpected opportunities. So very related to what we just said. Just keep an eye on wave states, keep an eye on trades, keep an eye on how people are skilling, what potential advantages you have in terms of agency in all of your lanes, what lane priority you have. A quick note here, if you guys don't know exactly what I mean by agency, agency is like your general power level. It's usually relative to the person you're kind of laning against or your counterpart. And the way you kind of think about that would be through various things. It could be health, mana, items, gold that you've actually spent. Gold pocketed doesn't really factor into agency. Could be the way your wave state is. Like if you're pushed in really far and you've got massive prio, you have a lot of agency because your counterpart can't really leave his lane. So in that respect, you have an advantage. You're going to be first on rotation. You're going to be able to make plays very proactively, or react to plays that they make without your counterpart there before your counterpart's able to react. So kind of keep that agency in mind and look for what you can accomplish with that agency. We've got creating a game plan part 2. Factors to consider. What's our win condition? Team comp, itemization options, relative scaling, direct counters, ideal teamfight approach, matchup volatility and snowball potential, player mismatches, rank, comfort, experience gaps, and Drake versus Herald. So these are all pretty important. You want to be able to visualize, what would make one team win over the other, Like there will be situations where either team can win in 99% of drafts, and so it's going to come down to how do they win? What do they want to play around? How do they play around it? How do they enable that win con? Maybe their team comp is just generally better at team fighting. Maybe their team comp is really, really good in side lanes. Maybe they can 1-3-1 and there's just like nothing you can do about it because you lose on both sides really hard. Maybe you have a very heavy physical damage team and they have a team that's able to itemize armor extremely easily. In that regard, you probably don't have a whole lot of time to win the game. Or you need to focus yourself on kind of itemizing a lot of armor pen and being able to kind of either counter their build or play away from them and somehow just win through like split pushing. There are a lot of things to think about with that. It doesn't have to be, just armor, just magic resist. It could also be like you have a team of like 5 people that heal a ton, and all of a sudden, Grievous Wounds is extremely high value for the enemy team, and your heals are cut down quite a bit because everyone's kind of incentivized to buy those items that counter you. Direct counters, maybe you have lanes that are just extremely bad and extremely oppressive on one side, and that can kind of change the game state a lot. Team fight approaches, again, that 1-3-1, that 5-man, you could do 1-4. Doesn't matter. You just want to think about how do these team fights play out? Does one team even want a team fight at all? Where should the team fight be? So, team fight approach in that regard doesn't necessarily just mean how many people are there. Are we playing it front to back to front? Is there a priority target, or are we kind of just going on whoever we can get on? It also means where is the team fight happening on the map? There are teams that excel at fighting in the river. There are teams that excel at fighting in the jungle. There are teams that excel at fighting in choke points. There are teams that are really, really bad at fighting in choke points. There are a lot of teams that, excel at kind of fighting in open areas. Like, for example, teams with Jinx tend to like to fight around open lanes with a lot of kind of openings into other parts of the map. And the reasoning behind that is because if you're able to pick up a kill, pick up an assist as Jinx in that fight, it's very, very easy for you to run everybody down or to kite into one of those corridors. So the team fights are generally safer for you. And in team comps with something like Jinx, if Jinx is able to stay alive, you've pretty much won the fight. So you've got to think about not only, how many people are we bringing to the fight and who are we hitting, it's also where is this fight happening? Matchup volatility, snowball potential. Think about what matchups we have on the map. Specifically, double melee matchups are typically the most important to look at. The reason behind that is because double melee matchups are extremely volatile. Usually, it's not going to be, just one person turbo counters the other melee. It's going to be kind of whoever gets an edge first is going to be able to push that advantage forward for quite a bit. And they're going to be able to alter that game state a lot. You don't want to have a permanently losing side lane. So it's very important to kind of make sure that your laner is the one that gets ahead. Player mismatches, rank, comfort, experience gaps. You might remember this from last time. We talked about this a little bit. In competitive play, you often get a chance to see your opponent before you actually get into the match, as opposed to things like solo queue where you don't have quite as much information. You do have OPGG to kind of look up your live match and look up stats on your opponents in solo queue, but it's not quite the same. Regardless, you can kind of still look for these things. Rank, comfort, experience gaps, these are huge. People really, really kind of undervalue this. There are plenty of times, especially in competitive fives, where you might have certain parts of a team that have significantly less experience or significantly lower ranks than their counterparts or than other people in that game. Being able to recognize that, okay, there may be actually a situation up here where my laner has an inherent advantage over their opponent because they have, 6, 7, 8 years of experience playing the game at a challenger level, and their opponent is like low diamond or high plat. This gives, that player a really, really massive advantage. And being able to play off that, being able to create disadvantageous situations for the enemy based off that is very, very effective in a lot of cases. And then we have Drake versus Herald. It's really important to understand this concept, to understand kind of when you want to take certain objectives and why. Does anyone know the general rule kind of for when you want to prioritize Drake over Herald, or the other way around?
Aren't you generalizely, sorry, that wasn't even a word, prioritize Herald before 14 minutes and then prioritize Drake after 14?
So yes and no. I would say there are situations in which you would want to prioritize Drake. Um, but you are kind of on to the correct thing. The reason you generally get more value out of Herald in those first 14 minutes is because plates are still up, so you're able to get a lot of gold kind of out of getting that Herald. Whereas if you take it after 14, you're exclusively taking it, for that sort of map control aspect and not necessarily for the resources that it grants you. Is there anyone else that might know, like, kind of on that same note, when you would want to prioritize that Drake then?
Soul win condition. If you want to, I guess, like bait out the enemy team into fighting you, like if you get like an early lead, and I guess like denying late game team comps, if you're able to get the soul to like match them, I guess.
Yeah, so you're onto the right track here as well. So I'll just kind of roll over it, but basically, the general rule is if you're an early game team and a snowbally team, you want to take Herald. The reason for that is because you don't really care about getting to late game, getting that soul. You want to smash them as hard as you can and end that game fast. The more gold you have, the more easily you're going to be able to accomplish that. So the best thing you can do is take that Herald and put that gold into the person snowballing the hardest, who's going to be able to kind of dominate the enemy team before they're able to scale in. On the other end of that, if you are a late game team, what you want to do is prioritize that Drake because you want time to scale in. You want time to be able to play for soul. You want time to actually make sure that your team is able to play the game properly. So if you're able to lock down one or two early Drakes, then your game is looking pretty good. Because in general, like if you're locked out of taking Drake as a late game team, then that early game team, if they're somehow able to get that Herald and that Drake, the game is looking very, very bad for you. You need to be able to keep them away from the Drakes, build time. Every Drake you take, waste another 5 minutes for them. And 5 minutes is a long, long time in League of Legends. If you're taking 2 Drakes, you're delaying that game before a soul by another 10 minutes for the enemy team. At that point, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to get soul, and very likely that you're going to have time to actually scale in. So as a late game team, just getting those Drakes off the map is pretty important. You don't necessarily care about getting that gold early on quite as much because generally speaking, experience is more kind of where your value lies. But with that early game team, you just want to kind of snowball it, stomp the enemy team before it's too late. So getting that gold onto the correct people really, really fast is extremely beneficial. And we've got creating a game plan part 3 here. So we want to repeat the same process from the perspective of the enemy team. So basically go back through this list, think about all these things, and kind of try to think about it like as if you were the enemy jungler or just the enemy team in general. Think about what kind of your win condition is, what you want to play for, how you want to play for it. What are the benefits to your team comp? What are the weaknesses of your team comp? And you want to answer all these questions here as well. So it's what needs to happen for them to win. How can they enable their win conditions? What objectives do they want? Where will they likely have priority? What does their optimal approach to team fighting look like? And do they even want to team fight? And then after you kind of fill out that list, you want to cross-reference those lists. By cross-referencing, you're going to be able to find where their goals are, find where your goals and their weaknesses line up, which means those are essentially free plays for you to make. And if it's a free play that you can, in theory, make, you should be kind of taking that play. So identifying those situations and then actually taking advantage of that is really, really big, because a lot of people will kind of fail to do that. You want to be able to, identify way, way, way ahead of time. Okay, these are situations that I'm going to be able to play around. This is how I'm going to accelerate my team. This is how I'm going to play for my win con. And the enemy team will not be able to react to it, or they at least should not. And because of that, 3 minutes before I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to be able to set it up properly. So like kind of knowing this stuff ahead of time is going to provide you opportunities to play the map correctly in order to enable those like major plays. Other things to think about here are how can we cover our own weaknesses and what can we do to prevent the enemy win con. So I've actually got a little example here. I'm going to play like a quick clip from a competitive game of my own, and it kind of relates into this pretty heavily. So we've got this right here.
St. Louis.
All right, let's see. So first things first, is this screen too dark to see? Or can you guys kind of see the champs? Actually,
I
let me...
still just only see the PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. Here, let me try to fix that then. All right, I've restarted it. Can you guys see?
Yep, perfect.
All right. Yeah, can you guys see the champs then too?
Yep.
Good. Okay. So things that we want to answer here are, what are the win cons in this game from both perspectives to start off? So does anyone want to kind of go through that?
Win con for the enemy team is Calista Thresh. The win con for you is probably bot as well. With like LeBlanc, since LeBlanc has early gank lethal for Trundle, it would be easier to camp.
Yeah.
You want to prioritize Drakes and try to snowball off Drake Herald.
Yeah, really good. That was pretty much it, spot on. And second question we want to answer here are, what needs to happen to enable those win cons then? So basically, to clarify that question a little bit more, we've kind of established that the win con for the teams is going to be kind of enabling bot side and playing through mid. So how do the teams kind of make that happen? Like what differs in the way that blue side plays it as opposed to red side here?
Well, Trundle, for example, should look to do his boost side for level 3 and try to transition gank through mid in order to try to get a kill off of like level 3, and then to focus more on bot side afterwards.
Yeah.
Whereas Elise should probably look to level 3 gank bot just straight up. She can also do like level 3 red side, but it's not as efficient.
Yeah, really good. Again, you've pretty much hit it on the nose there. Basically, the big plan for Elise here is that she needs to get to bot side, and she needs to dive my bot laners. She needs to push in with Calista Thresh, crash a wave, which should be able to very, very easily happen for them in the early game. And then they're going to dive the turret and just see what they can get there. And off that lead, they're going to be able to snowball pretty hard and just kind of keep revisiting bot lane. So how can blue side prevent that win con then? Like, how can Trundle prevent that from happening?
Probably skip wolves and get red to level 3 and match the gank. Whereas Elise, if Elise doesn't really get a dive here in bot lane 3, then the game is pretty much like in Trundle's favor.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you're actually hitting everything on the nose. This is really good. And then how can red prevent the enemy win con? How can Elise make sure that everything works out? Like, is there something that she can do to kind of ensure that everything goes smooth?
Jungle tracking?
Yeah, that's one piece to it. But is there something like very, very specific, like even just like the way that her team can move in the early game to really, really make sure that they're able to play for what they want to play for?
I would assume
Maybe
tell the Founders to try to get prio into like pushing the wave up first and then warding Raptors. So you know exactly what his pathing is.
Yeah, that's one part of it. How about like initial clear? Is there anything that she can do about the initial clear?
Critical jungle and Trundle.
Yeah, really good. So basically, one thing that she could do here is her team is actually quite a bit stronger than ours on the bot side of the map, level 1, to the point where if she decided to just walk into our jungle on red side, they could play off Thresh and Callista and Lissandra and probably just force me off this red, force a vertical jungle, and just not let me into my own bot side. And that would be very, very detrimental to our game plan. One thing for them to think about is that Elise is actually really weak in that level 1 fight. Lissandra's actually not that great either. So there is a chance that they can't pull it off that clean, but they'd have to rely on kind of finding some sort of mismatch situation or playing off of Callista extremely hard in that level 1 fight. So it is doable, but it's not guaranteed and it's very hard to pull off. I would say it's maybe like a 60% play at best for them, which is very coin flippy, and it kind of explains the reasoning behind why they might not want to do that. But she could also try to, force me outside or out of my bot side jungle very early on, outside of even invading. It could be like maybe she just fast clears from red to like blue, Grump right into my red, but at that point it's probably too late if I'm kind of thinking about how this map works and pathing down there fast and skipping a camp. And then let's think about kind of what is our job as the jungler from both perspectives here. So what's my job as Trundle in this game?
Enabling your bot side.
defend bot lane so they can outscale Callista. Is there?
Yeah, absolutely. Trundle's job is basically just make sure that Elise can't pull off the dive. Defend my bot side as much as possible. And that's really like, if I can pull that off, the game is in our favor. Their Elise does not scale into this game. Their Callista does not scale into this game. It's looking pretty bad for them if they can't pull off the dive. And outside of that, I just want to land whatever like opportunistic ganks I can through side lane. So if I can land a gank onto top lane, that's great. It's not like going to be like a crazy game changer, but it's still very good for us. Especially because we do have double TPs and we have very strong side laners to the point where we can play 1-3-1 pretty effectively in this game. Another thing to think about is mid lane here. We addressed it earlier. We said that not only is kind of bot lane the win con here, but like mid lane is like very important. We want to be able to play through mid lane. We want to be able to enable our mid lane. And that's important for both sides. So another job for Trundle here and Elise would be playing through mid as much as possible, making sure that we're actually able to get through mid and enable our mid laners to perform the job that they need to do, or to get prio in their lane so that we can establish situations where we can make 4-man plays happen in the bot side. So like a really big thing that could happen in this game is if Elise wanted to pull off that dive really effectively in the bot lane, she would actually path mid and then bot. But another thing to think about here, and I'll kind of address this actually after we answer this, or yeah, I'll save that actually for a sec. But what's the job of Elise then? That's fine. I can answer this one basically because I feel like we kind of already went over it. But essentially, Elise's job is dive bot, make sure that Trundle can't stop that play from happening. And one of the ways that she can make sure I can't stop that play from happening is by playing through mid first. Are there any times in this game where there are clear advantages in terms of abilities when it comes to the important matchups that we're looking at, which would be jungle, mid, and bot lane? Specifically, like in those first few levels, like 1 through 4, 1 through 5.
Like the basic abilities?
Yeah. So like just kind of
At
like
least
standard abilities
in-
and the way that people train their abilities. Are there timestamps that we can think of where there's like a massive advantage for one side over the other?
Callista level 1, Elise level 3, Nautilus level 3. I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, that's really good. So a big one that you mentioned there was Elise level 3. Before Elise level 3, she's really useless. Her ganks are extremely weak compared to Trundle. Trundle has Q, Trundle has either E or W. So at that level 2 mark, Elise is very weak. Does anyone know how the mid matchup goes in the first 3 levels? Or how it goes in general?
Lissandra should get push lead in level 1, but yeah, I think Lissandra should get priority in this lane with their wave clear advantage in the
Yeah.
first few levels.
Absolutely. So Lissandra is going to have push lead. Does anyone know what she skills in the first 3 levels?
QWE? Or she do like 2 points Q or something?
Yeah, it's almost always going to be QWE. Nobody is ever going to train E level 2 unless they're like extremely scared, which would be insane to see. She needs to be able to establish mid prio. She needs to be able to harass. Having Q and W gives her a lot of power in the first 2 levels and a lot of lane control. Does anyone know what LeBlanc typically has first 2 levels?
I think she starts at W.
She starts W, Q, then E.
Yeah, so the thing about LeBlanc is she'll almost always start W. The second thing that she'll start, or the second thing she'll skill, will actually kind of depend on the game state. So if the lane is gankable, she's going to skill E, and if the lane's not gankable, she's going to skill Q. So with all of that in mind, we need to think about kind of what potential opportunities will there be in this game. If I'm Trundle, I'm thinking, okay, I know my mid laner is going to get shoved in. I know that they want to 3 or 4 man bot and want to shove me out of my bot lane jungle. And I know that Elise is extremely weak level 2 and Lissandra is extremely weak level 2. Whereas LeBlanc and Trundle are both very strong level 2. This opens me up to potentially thinking about, like, is there a play that can happen before that level 3 mark? So I need to keep my eyes on the map. I need to look for changing wave states and try to look out for, is there a possibility that I can land anything early in order to prevent the rest of their sort of plan from going through? And with that in mind, we're actually just gonna watch through this clip real quick.
Will be. We'll have to see where those pathings are going to lead.
Right, let me see. Is it playing?
Starting on the top sides of the map. See if they want to path towards.
No.
If we see a little bit
All right,
more
I've got the wrong one playing, I think. Let me see. All right, how about now?
See where those pathings are going to lead both these junglers, both starting on the top sides of
Yep.
the map.
All right,
See if
perfect.
they want to path towards bot, or if we see a little bit more individual, or at least solo lane focus here, especially that mid lane matchup that we were looking at very heavily, as we do see trades across that top and mid. A little bit of aggression coming out early.
And Kitsuo actually not opting to use his sweeper, so this is fully spotted for the side of St. Louis as he is going to cross over to the map, start working on what we expect to be that blue buff, that Gromp, and guess what? We talked about the game plan for University of St. Thomas. They aren't hiding their cards. It's all about Array's Callista And early, that seems to be at least where Kitsuo is pathing from the side of St. Thomas.
That's going to be an interesting one, especially when we see which jungler can
Oh,
really
level
get off
two.
the map first. We're already seeing
Uh-oh.
a mid lane gank. Could this be going down to first blood? Robbie Bob still
got no
level
E,
2.
no
He
claw.
does not. He's going to be locked up. This is going to be first blood of the grand finals. Robbie Bob goes down.
Zaga, the
So that's kind of the first chunk of this play that we're going to look at. And like we can see that basically we took the time to kind of visualize how this game needs to play out. And then it happened exactly kind of the way we visualized it. And that's like the way that we want to kind of approach all of our games. And there's more to this clip as well. The next clip and the next thing that we kind of talked about is we need to prevent the bot dive from happening. We need to hover this play. We need to make sure that the dive just is not possible for the enemy team. So one important piece to this was making sure that we play through mid first, making sure that they're not able to 4-man. Lysandra is dead. We've got a clear advantage in our mid lane. We have our TP up, so if she TP's back, we can always still look for a quick recall onto LeBlanc and a TP back in with a slight agency advantage if needed. Otherwise, we can hold on to that TP and hold that advantage for later. But it's really important that we play through mid first. We establish some sort of lane advantage and make it harder for Elise to kind of pull off this bot side play. But the next part to this is I need to kind of be cautious about my red buff. I know that they're likely going to be able to push me off it. So I need to keep an eye on kind of the bottom wave state. And I need to make sure that I'm doing what I can to prevent this dive from happening.
only returning member for St. Louis from last year is able to trick Robbie Bob, able to catch him on a wave that usually is crashed in that matchup, catch him off guard, and get things going for the side of St. Louis. As now it's going to be on Kitsuo. This wave is stacked up. They might be looking for a dive.
A little bit of damage done here. See how much Tsum does take from that one. Now Kitsuo potentially pathing back towards mid, going for a little bit of invade. We'll find Zaga here as well, but don't know if he's going to be able to aggress too much as the chicken is in the bush. He's going to walk right by
He should
it.
know. He should know that's going on. You can still see on the minimap that
So the big thing here is I opt to take Raptors because I know it's going to get me level 3, 1, and I should be able to secure it relatively easily. Whereas if I'm taking red buff right now, I'm not positive that I'm going to be able to finish it in time, not having smite right away, before their bot lane is able to rotate onto me, before their jungle is able to rotate onto me. So I'm taking what's more guaranteed here, and that still positions me to be able to react to the play that I'm expecting to happen. You can even hear the casters talk about it here. I don't know if the audio is playing through the stream, but the casters are spending a decent amount of time talking about kind of, you know, bot lane potentially prepping for this bot dive. So pretty important to be able to kind of make sure that I'm in the right place to be able to contest this.
that Raptor camp is not down for the side of Kitsuo, but he doesn't care. He's going straight for that red buff, and because there was
A big thing here, can anyone notice anything about like the information that I have and the wave state in bot lane? I can go over it then. So basically, I know that Elise is on my red. I don't know for sure that her bot laners are there. I am, positive that they're trying to force me off red. Worst case scenario would be they go for the bot dive, and that's why I'm in my bot side jungle right now. Best case scenario would be Elise is on my red, and her bot laners are in their lane still, because I'm stronger than Elise right now. I can very easily walk in, shove her off my red, and take it away. But another good kind of scenario for me is that her bot laners walk up into my jungle, because it means that they're not taking that crash, they're not taking that dive play, and they're actually opting to play for my jungle instead, which is a pretty good trade, because the only reason I'm down here to begin with is to make sure that dive doesn't happen. If the dive doesn't happen, I'm in a very good spot. The team play is looking pretty solid. So I'm waiting for this wave to push up, because when that bot wave crashes into my own wave, I'm going to be able to figure out whether or not their bot lane is playing for my jungle or they're playing for the dive. at which point I'm going to be able to adjust my play and try to find something else to do.
Was a 3-wave crash on the side of University
So right now I'm just hovering red buff.
He's able to get this one for free.
I see the wave go in.
I believe
The second this wave crashes and I can see that their support and AD carry are missing, I know for a fact that they're coming up to Elise to back her up on the red play. So this red play is no longer possible for me to contest, but also the dive is done. The play in bot lane is done for them. So it's no longer even necessary for me to be down here anymore. So now I can path top lane and I can lock down advantages up there before Elise is able to get up because I have a tempo advantage. It's going to take much longer for her to rotate all the way around through her own jungle in the top side and get to top lane than it's going to take for me to rotate just quickly from Raptors up into the top side. So with this tempo advantage, I'm going to be able to establish potentially another lane advantage. And if I can get both side laners ahead in this game, it's going to be very easy to continue playing through at least mid and then look for teleport plays into the bot lane or look for advantageous kind of outnumbered situations in the bot lane.
He knows that this is happening as well. He's going to go ahead and pat back towards
There's
top
a
lane.
reason that they're sitting down there and we're sitting up here. I think that's proven right now.
For sure. We'll see if they can turn this around, at least for University of St. Thomas early on. Keeping the aggression in bot lane, keeping the wave push, giving Kitsuo a little bit of wiggle room here in the early pathing.
And I really like what the side of University of St. Thomas is doing in this matchup because not only was it the 3-wave crash, but now that does cause the bounce. And with the strength of Kalista and Thresh early, they are able to really pressure and force Andy Bendy to trade his health bar to try and farm those minions. And Tristana does shove out on her own. But I got to change my focus, Mazal, because
We might get another
gotta be a
going
flash.
down here. Yeah, it's got to be
Play.
pushed. Does flash. He's still
Earlier.
slowed. Still so much damage.
What's
For
up?
Elise, like, could Elise have done something differently? Or Elise and Lysandra do something differently to prepare or like to execute their game plan better? Or choose like a no kind of play option?
They could try to flip the game from level 1 and go for that sort of 60% play that we talked about where they just lock in a vertical jungle right away and I'm not able to get into bot side to begin with, in which case I wouldn't have been able to hover the dive and they could have pulled off that dive very easily. Another way they could have done this is that Lysandra actively decides not to shove the lane even though, like, in theory she should be shoving in at level 1. If she's able to kind of just play the lane relatively neutral or play it back toward her own turret even, yes, she loses agency and she loses kind of priority, but she is going to at least make sure that she's going to get level 3 safely without me just walking into her lane and killing her. So because she didn't do that, the game plan kind of opened itself up. Like we had that one note about kind of looking for opportunities, looking for mistakes from the enemy, and factoring in kind of what we know about matchups. So the thing that we knew about the mid lane matchup and the jungle matchup is that Elise isn't going to have E until level 3. And similarly, Lysandra is not going to have E until level 3. Which means level 2, Elise has no option to actually defend this mid gank. So the best thing possible for them to do is just not get ganked in general in the mid lane.
Okay.
Like all she
So
has to do is
Lysandra-
survive to level 3.
So I would have to just play the first couple waves a bit slower,
Mhm.
and maybe she can look to get priority on level 3, and then rotate over to for dive with numbers advantage or something like that.
Basically, yeah. So the bulk of it kind of falls onto Lysandra, making sure that she's not going to get ganked level 2 where it's undefendable. And one kind of thing to keep in mind here is that if you're the jungler, on red side, you can actually just tell your Lysandra exactly like when you're going to be vulnerable, right? Like, if I'm Elise in this case, I'm telling my mid laner, hey, please don't get ganked level 2. This would be like really, really terrible for us. And in order to avoid that, I need you to either like skill differently, which would be pretty bad for your lane, or you just need to like opt to play the lane differently than you normally would. You have to, concede some early pressure in order to make sure that this undefendable gank just like doesn't happen at all.
Or like a topside ward, like early on, right? Like a level 1 ward.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
One thing to keep in mind here is that like it's very rare for people to go from like blue major camp into gank, or even just like blue side into gank. The reason for that is that it leaves your red up, which opens your pathing up to a lot of counterplay. So you can see here that like I went for that gank, but I was also aware that I'm probably losing my red buff for this.
Okay.
And the reason it didn't matter that much is because if I lose my red buff, they lose their timer for the dive, right? So I already got my gank off. I don't need the red buff to make sure that I win the mid fight because they can't win the mid fight even if I don't have red buff. So if Elise decides to contest, it's a bad idea for them. If Elise decides not to contest, we take the play for free. And if they take that red timer, I've already done my job bot side, which means we've now accomplished our job in the mid lane and in the bot lane. So the only lane left is top lane. And because, again, we already talked about this, but they made that play into the bot side, that means that now we have a timer for top side because we have a pretty major tempo advantage. Her pathing is like very, very wonky. And it makes sense. Like her pathing does make sense. But it just sets her up in a weird position where we have like a timing advantage and we're able to make these plays for free.
Damn, it's done! And 2 kills back to back for St.
So then we're able to lock down a pretty solid advantage, and as you could probably expect in this game, we stomp them relatively quickly because basically we've enabled every possible win con in the first 4 minutes of the game. The only thing that needs to continue happening is that I prevent Elise on this next timer from doing anything bot side, and I continue playing through mid lane. Because if I'm able to continue playing through mid lane, their angles are very, very bad for bot lane. We have LeBlanc, who's able to play both reactively and proactively, and we have a lot of options to kind of defend. And as long as we scale into this game, Elise is not going to be able to be impactful at all. Kalista is going to get outscaled pretty heavily, and it just looks pretty solid for us all around the board. So let me go back to the presentation real quick. It did go kind of a little bit longer than I thought it would so far, so I'm going to very, very quickly roll over a lot of concepts. We're just kind of going to speed run these concepts, at which point I'll leave some time to kind of ask questions about any of the concepts you guys want to. So we've got, let's see. Can everyone see?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So kind of just speed run time, lots and lots of concepts. If anything is like particularly interesting, just shout it out and I will kind of dive in a little bit more on it. But playing the map, important concepts, play for tempo, play from fog, hover plays, hold hands and short shift. Actually, I'll give like quick kind of like extra elaboration on some of these as we roll through. But play for tempo. Make sure you're playing for that timing advantage that we just talked about. Everyone talks about tempo. Nobody really talks about what it is usually, but tempo, the best way to look at it is like agency over distance to the next objective. Objective is like a very loose term here. It doesn't necessarily mean Drake, Herald. It just means the next thing that you need to be at. Like in this case, for me, it could be bot lane. I need to be at the bot lane dive. That's my objective. That's my goal. I'm playing for tempo here, so I'm playing 1 to make sure that my personal power level is, up. It's matching my counterpart or ahead, and that I'm in the right spot to be able to play for it. And then playing for tempo, once I see that they're on my red buff, means, okay, her rotation is much longer than mine. Her rotation to the top side of the map looks like this. Whereas my rotation to the top side of the map looks like this. Mine is much shorter. I can get there very quickly. So despite the fact that I'm losing my red buff here, I'm getting a timer onto her top side. I'm very easily able to pull off this play. And this is a concept that extends into every match and all points of every match, where we can very, very heavily focus on tempo and developing these sort of timing advantages And again, it's not just kind of distance. It's not just this line. It's also how powerful you are. How strong are you individually? How strong are your laners that are involved in the play? These are all things that we need to consider. But tempo is very important, and it's kind of the driving factor behind a lot of wins. Then we have playing for Fog. It's very important as the jungler that you're playing for Fog at a lot of points in the game, especially if you're playing more kind of advanced lane assignments than just kind of 5-man deathballing it. So 5-man, like deathballing, is usually very easy to pull off, but very effective, and people use that even in professional play. But another kind of lane assignment people use very often is you would do like 1-4-0. You could do 1-3-1. You could do 4-1-0. You could do just like 5 straight up right here. And when you're playing something like 1-3-1, what is really, really important as the jungler is that you're not actually seen. So if we have side laner, and then AD carry support, as the jungler, we need to be like here, or here, or here, or here, or here. We want to be hovering our teammates, but we don't want to let the enemy know where we're hovering. We have a lot more pressure not showing on the map than we do actually kind of just sitting on top of our AD carry and support. Because if we're close enough to match their plays regardless, it's more important for us to just be unknown factors. Because if we are unknown factors, it becomes extremely troll for the enemy to now send multiple people up here to fight this, or even just try to 1v1 this. Because if I'm hovering and I'm topside, that play is very dangerous and they lose the game off it. So if they're not sure where I am, they can't pull off these plays. I have a lot more pressure just being hidden. Another quick thing to go off of here is to kind of hold hands and short shift. So we just talked about hovering plays a little bit. I'll kind of skip over that. Holding hands and short shifting, make sure that your laners are able to do what they want to do. If I'm the jungler and I'm playing something like Trundle, it's not really that important in the late game that I'm picking up resources left and right and full clearing my camps. It's much more important for me to just be kind of making sure that my AD carry can live, or that my important side laner can live. So for that reason, if my AD carry wants to go catch this mid wave high in order to get prio up here and be able to rotate into the jungle and get vision on whatever objective we're about to set up, it's probably better for me to just be like sitting here, making sure that my AD carry can actually safely farm that wave. Get those resources and then get out of there so that we're able to move to wherever we need to move. People overlook this quite often and kind of leave their team to do whatever they want to do just on their own. And that is when they get punished for it. Maybe my AD carry is catching this up here and I decide, okay, I'm going to take Raptors because, you know, I'm still kind of close. I'm not quite close enough and this person can very easily get ganked. All of a sudden, the game is looking very bad. It's a 4v5 for 50 seconds. Baron's up. We threw. So make sure, you know, we're hovering that. We're keeping this in mind. Short shifting, it's very similar to hovering. It's very similar to holding hands. And it's very similar to what we talked about earlier by like playing through mid. If we're playing through mid, we create really awkward angles everywhere else on the map. So mid's kind of area of control is like all over here. And if we're shoved into mid and their mid laner's locked into turret, maybe we're like all the way up here, it's very easy for us to rotate down into plays that they can't rotate to. It would be very troll for them to rotate to that and just bleed waves left and right. So in that regard, what we can do is actually set this up so that we crash this wave with our mid laner and rotate down with our mid laner so that we have a 4-man play here. Another way we can play this is the more common short shift where this crash down here is slightly desynced. It's crashing one wave after this mid wave, which means we've got a little bit of time to escort down here and set up this dive positioning, at which point the enemy team has to decide, okay, either we are taking this and trying to take the fight 2v4 and dying, or 3v4 and dying, because this person's locked in here, or we are rotating back here. We're just conceding the wave and we're bleeding, 2 to 3 waves. That would be really, really bad for them. So even just kind of hovering this play, even escorting your mid laner down, and not really doing anything. Like, you don't have to actively even dive this. It's still a ton of pressure. You're creating massive, massive gold discrepancy, and creating a very, very big advantage for your team. More things to think about here. Know when and when not to take a turret. If you are playing like a lane bully in the top lane, something like Teemo, or your team has something like a Teemo and you're kind of just shoving in your laner, and then you're bouncing waves and you're freezing back here and you're harassing them, keeping them off the wave, what would be really bad for you is if the jungler on your team took Herald, came up, and just destroyed your turret. Because now little Teemo's playing all the way up here, and he's going to get rotated on. Because this is a terrible angle for him. The same way that we talked about pushing mid and creating awkward angles for the enemy team, we can create awkward angles for our own team by using Herald incorrectly, taking turrets incorrectly, putting our teammate into a really bad spot where they can get rotated on very easily, and all of a sudden Teemo has no pressure. Doesn't just apply to Teemo, it applies to like any lane bully, anyone who like doesn't want to get frozen on, anyone who doesn't want to be overextending all game. Whereas maybe there's like a champion up here that we do really want to play off of. Maybe we have like a Camille, and Camille's really strong. Camille has a lot of kills, and Camille needs to get onto the map and maybe get involved in some plays down here, some plays over here. Maybe we have a Jace who is a lane bully, but is also really good at sieging and really good at kind of taking objectives and creating map control. In that respect, maybe it's beneficial for us to take this Herald, put even more gold onto that carry, and then get them freed up to move around the map and start pushing things in, start getting involved in fights. Basically, if your champion wants to be in team fights and you want to be unlocked and snowballing, it's probably better to take that turret and get involved. If your team, or if you're a champion, or if your team has a champion in that lane that doesn't want to get involved in those fights, doesn't really excel at fighting in those fights, it's probably better to just leave them in lane. Let them continue bullying their laner. They can get the turret themselves if they're really far ahead anyway, so what's the point? Another big way to use Herald is, if you can't really think of where to use it, probably just use it mid lane because of that sphere of influence that we talked about. This has the biggest sphere of influence out of any lane. Taking that mid turret down is usually more beneficial than taking one of these sides. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases. Other things to think about here, use vision roams to create future plays. So one big thing to think about that with is, like, if I'm roaming in here with my support and creating fog and getting pink wards over here, getting vision, trying to kind of set up this play right here, there's no reason for me not to also try to find a flank ward for my side laner. Try to find some sort of opportunity that my mid laner, my side laner, anyone who can get back here can play from. Let's say like I have a Kennen or something. It's really beneficial for me to just sneak a ward anywhere over here that they're not going to sweep it, so that I have like a fantastic angle to just TP in for this fight once it starts. Like, it's great to have vision control to be able to play off of for the objective. It's even better if we have vision control and a way for our side laner to enter the fight. So really good there. One play at a time is just a general rule to think about here. If you're the jungler, you kind of get to decide what plays happen on the map, more often than not. The only other role that might get to decide that, I guess there are two roles, mid lane and support. But don't kind of try to force more than one play at a time as a team. If I'm trying to orchestrate this dive in the bot lane that we just talked about, and we have, 3 people going down here, or 4 people going down here, and we're diving this crash, we shouldn't also be fighting up here, because there's no possible way that we're also going to be able to react to this if they all of a sudden send 1 more person up here, 2 more people up here, anything like that. It's much better for us to just stick to one play at a time and finish that play. Once we're finished with that play, we can think about what else to do. Other things here. Who gets resources, how and where? So again, we kind of talked about champions who don't necessarily need farm that much. Like, there are plenty of junglers who just kind of, it's more beneficial for them to skip these camps later on and hover their laners than it is for them to actually farm. If we have, strong carries in a game, and we're playing something like Trundle, Sejuani, any like tank, any even like bruiser that just doesn't need that much gold, Xin Zhao, Jarvan, these champs really don't need that much gold past mid game. to the point where it's fine for you to just sacrifice these camps, not farm them for a while to maintain tempo advantages. It's also fine for you to concede those camps to your own team. Give over those camps to your mid laner. Give over those camps to your AD carry. This will create pretty massive advantages for you. You know, you're going to be able to get your carries even farther ahead, accelerate them farther, and just all you really need to do is hover them, make sure they live. There are a lot of games in competitive play where you'll be able to kind of notice that, oh wow, this jungler has like a 3-level advantage on the enemy, and all of a sudden everyone in the game starts catching up to him. And the reason for that is that they start conceding their own camps because they realize it's not really that important for them to be turbo accelerated past that sort of mid-game mark. Playoff invade timers. If you took a camp, take the next spawn too. A general rule for jungle is if you are stealing a camp, you want to steal the next one as well. If you are just stealing it once, you're kind of just resetting it for them and buffing up that XP timer. The benefit to taking a camp is that not only do you get that golden XP, you also get the timer, right? And with that timer, you are now totally able to kind of predict when people are going to be over here, when this camp is up and able to be contested, and you actually have more information about it than the enemy does, unless they had a ward on top of it, in which case you can set up for it first. We talk all the time about how it's possible to create plays around stuff like this, and kind of playing off these chokes and creating this play like beforehand, like 40 seconds before. Very rarely do you hear anybody talk about playing off like this, playing off this, playing off this. And it's the same thing. It's the same concept. We have the timer for it. We have chokes to play off of. We can get here 40 seconds before because we have the exact timer and set up the exact same play we would have down here. It just kind of requires a little bit of communication and a little bit of kind of working through priority and setting up your laners to back you up on that play. So a lot of overlooked plays kind of happen in these areas right here. We can make these plays happen. It just takes prep. And it takes actually taking one camp and then working for that play on the next respawn. Another thing to think about here, early game job, proactive versus reactive. In that game we just watched with Trundle versus Elise, Trundle's job is very reactive. The proactive part of it is playing through mid, but the reactive part of it is making sure that this dive can't happen and reacting to it as fast as we possibly can if they're kind of posturing for it. Whereas Elise's job is to be very proactive. Elise's job is to make that dive happen. Elise's job is to force Trundle away from the play. At which point, you know, the game is going to get very, very hard for the other team. And then let's see, we've got cover crashes. Whenever your team is trying to crash massive waves, we should probably be there. It's very, very beneficial for us to just be covering that play because the time when our laners are getting ganked most often is when their lane is like right here. They're about to crash it, but not quite there yet. They're trading because this enemy laner right here wants to keep them off of the crash. And they really want that crash. So both laners are desperate to kind of fight for control of the wave. This is a very easy timer for the enemy jungler to walk in, get an easy flank off, and kill your laner. If you're waiting for this play, more often than not, the jungler the laner who's pushed up, the laner who has control here, is the one who is slightly winning trades, the one who's kind of got control of this lane. If you're hovering this play, you're just ready for it to happen, you're waiting for this flank, all of a sudden you win that 2v2, that's a much bigger play than even just kind of getting that crash to begin with, or getting one kill, or like diving the person. But you know, that being said, it also opens you up for the dive. It opens you up for helping them crash this wave. Maybe you just walk in and hit a couple minions. You get them that recall. This person's still locked into lane. This person comes back with massive agency advantage and a lot of tempo. And with that, maybe you recall with them, you sync up, you're able to play for basically anything you want to. Other things to think about here, understand what comes next. And what I mean by that is when a kill happens, when you lock down a kill, when you lock down a major objective, when you steal a camp and you open yourself up to, you know, some crazy warding, understand what that leads into. Also understand kind of what plays lead into for the enemy. If the enemy is playing for a pick and they land that pick, you need to know what can they play for and what should they play for. What options are there on the map for them to be able to look for, and how can they play for it? Because that will open you up to looking for counterplays, to looking for cross-map plays, to looking for any way to kind of prevent them from accelerating the game too far with that lead. Or it will prevent you from contesting an objective that's already gone. So like a lot of time in lower elo games and mid elo games, you'll see people who are pathing back toward this Drake because somebody just got picked in the bot lane or something, and they're coming back and they're like, oh no, Drake is up, I need to get there to contest it. By the time they get here, this Drake is gone. It's much better for them to realize that as fast as they can, path up here, and just make a cross-map play happen. Or even path up here, dive someone, make something happen somewhere else that they can't react to. It's very, very important to, know what can go on and how to play around that. And then position yourself to match plays. So we just talked about cross-map plays. We talked about creating advantageous situations on the other side of the map. Big things that we can do are, if we know that they're about to look for this, just set ourselves up to quickly react with this. If we know that they're about to look for a play onto our bot lane, and we can't get there in time, do whatever we can to set up this top play. We don't want to lose this top play timer, because if it gets to a situation where they're able to make a bot play happen and we're not able to accomplish anything in the top side, that's not a good trade for us. We want to make sure that we're equalizing trades or taking advantageous trades in every situation. Create awkward angles. We talked about that, kind of just shoving in lanes, making sure that it's impossible for counterparts to rotate down to the play, at which point, we're able to make plays happen for free, or we prevent plays from being able to happen for the enemy team. Enable mismatches. So again, very similar concept. Shove in your lanes, make sure the counterpart can't roam down, and then we can roam down with a big numbers advantage. Play through mid when possible, very similar. Delay free kills. This doesn't get talked about enough. There are a lot of times in games where there is a guaranteed kill, like in your lane, or you roam down, you gank somebody, and the kill is guaranteed. Let's say you roam into the bot lane. This person's running away, but they just get to like here, and they're 1 health. They're very, very free kill. There's no reason to rush this kill. There's a much bigger reason to leave that person alive for a little bit. If this person's sitting here with 1 health, we have Drake coming up in 50 seconds and timers are 25 seconds, it's much more beneficial for us to waste as much time as possible before we kill this person. Because the less time this person has to get back to the play, the more easily able we are to set up this play effectively and take another mismatched fight, another advantageous situation around an objective that they can't react to. Avoid outnumbered situations, especially when stronger. This also does not really get talked about enough. When we are stronger as a team, when we're stronger as certain lanes, when we're stronger on certain parts of the map, our main goal is just to not be outnumbered, right? Because the only way they're going to beat us in fights is by outnumbering us. So if we can prevent that from happening at all costs, we're totally fine. If we have 1 top laner here, 1 top laner here, 1 mid laner, 2, and 1 jungle, 1 jungle, this is a really good situation for us because we're winning. We are stronger, let's say mid lane and bot lane. So as long as we keep those numbers even, there's no way we can possibly lose this. A really bad thing that could happen for us would be they take 1 and move it down here. And we're not able to move because we're crashed in here. And when that happens, the best we can do is match it like this. And then all of a sudden, it's 3v4, and that's not good for us. That is the only situation in which, they're going to be able to pull it back a little bit, maybe shut us down, get those bounties, and pull the game back. A really good way for us to play this instead would be we have this. We rotate over here. We play through mid first, like we already talked about, and we lock this person into lane. Because if we lock this person into lane and we are hand-holding and kind of just escorting our mid laner around there's no possible way for them to ever make an outnumbered play, because we still just have 1-1. Maybe they rotate up here, but they're giving us an outnumbered situation again down here. If we are walking around like this, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, there's no play that can ever happen, even if both of them rotate here. So avoiding those situations at all costs and maintaining numbers when we have advantageous situations is very good. And then last but not least, track the enemy jungler. So, if we know that their jungler started on blue and he got red and then he ganked somewhere and he has 16 CS, then he has full cleared his blue side. That's at least the most likely situation. This should be gone, this should be gone, and this should be gone. So kind of keep an eye on those numbers, ping the enemy jungler, ping where his plays are. If we keep in mind kind of what their plays are, what their possibilities are, what options do they have on the map, how do they want to path optimally, how should they path, then it gets very easy for us to kind of predict everything that's going to happen. And if we know what's going to happen, we can play around it. And if we play around it and they're kind of just autopiloting and pathing how they've pathed in like hundreds of games before, then we are at a massive, massive, massive advantage. So kind of being the jungler and having the option to kind of make plays on the map, and we have all this information and we're actively using it. We're not just autopiloting, puts our team at a massive advantage in the early game. And the early game is a large, large part of this game. So it's 12 minutes after we were supposed to end, but I'm definitely want to take some questions here and there if anyone has any. So does anyone have any questions regarding any of the things we covered or anything, even just like general questions?
So if we're interested in starting to jungle coming from a different position, like where do you recommend we start?
Sure, yeah. So I would recommend playing just easy champions. Play Warwick, play Nunu, play champions that are just generally like high sustain, fast clear. Play Trundle, play champions that can play the jungle like a variety of different ways potentially as well. Like there are full clear junglers, there are tempo junglers that play for ganks and map impact primarily. Highly, highly, highly recommend starting out with like Nunu, Trundle, Sejuani, any of those champs like that, because your clear is going to be very healthy. You're a very durable champion. You can opt to take ganks where you want, make plays where you want. And those champions, because they're like a little bit easier to play than other champions, like they free you up to be able to think about what the proper strategy is to play the game, right? Because if you're playing a really hard champion, like a lot of people kind of default to playing something like Lee Sin because it's a fun, flashy champion. They spend a lot of their time just focusing on like getting their mechanics correct, being able to pull off plays like insects, like very consistently. And a lot of their effort just goes into that. And if they can't perform that perfectly, then they lose a lot of their pressure. Whereas a player playing a champion who, or that doesn't require that many mechanics, can really, really focus on playing the map properly. And that's what's more important in the end, is just understanding the map and understanding where you need to be and what you need to do as the jungler. Because if you can do that, then you can play any jungler, even the ones that take more mechanics, and you can just kind of add them in over time. All right, let's see. Does anyone else have any other questions about anything? All right. In that case, I believe we will call it there. Are there any before we go? Are there any like suggestions you guys have or things that you guys want to learn about in the like next masterclass? Like very specific topics or anything?
The next one that you do, or the next one in general?
Either way, I mean, but specifically the next one I do is more helpful for me because I'll be able to get that prepped and whatnot.
I'd like to learn some more about like some top lane stuff.
Sure, yeah. I think we've got some top lane master classes coming up.
Sweet. You know, chance?
What's that?
Do you know when the top lane master classes are coming in? Do you have any idea?
I am actually not positive, but I believe that we will have a calendar coming out very soon.
Roger that. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no problem.
I think for your next class, like a specific focus on pathing and or itemization would be really helpful.
Yeah, sounds good. We can definitely focus on some of that stuff.
For jungle, maybe like if your level 1 gets ruined, like you get invaded and like it's really hard for you to like change your pathing. Maybe like how to come back from being really behind off something like that.
For sure, yeah. I've got some good stuff on that, so we can definitely roll over that as well. Yeah, in that case, we'll call it there. Thank you guys for coming. I hope that was helpful. If you guys do have any questions or anything, feel free to tag me in the masterclass chat and just, I'll try to answer as soon as I can. But yeah, thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you for your help. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.